I'm suddenly awake. There's a sound of scratching very close to my left ear. It's pitch dark, and I'm lying on the ground in the Australian desert. I have no idea what time it is, and all is quiet, apart from the scratch, scratch, scratch of claws in the dirt beside me. What creature of the night has woken me from my fitful sleep? Should I open my eyes and assess what kind of predator I might be up against? Or maybe I should keep my eyes shut, play dead, and hope this thing goes away. I am out of my comfort zone. I have a serious dose of imposter syndrome. I have the desert dust below me and the unfamiliar southern sky above, and nothing but a flimsy sleeping bag to protect me from whatever is sharpening its claws beside me. 3 weeks previously, I'd arrived in Australia from Scotland. I was 21 and ready for adventure. At first, I stayed with my aunt in Melbourne, gently adjusting to life down under. After a week, she started scanning the morning paper for jobs she thought I could do with my working holiday visa. She wasn't convinced that my plan of busking around Australia with my fiddle was a good one. Doesn't sound very safe, she said. By the time I emerged for breakfast each morning, she'd circled a few job adverts and left the paper obviously beside my cereal bowl. Shop assistant, restaurant staff, childcare, usual gap year suggestions. And then one morning, a small box in the jobs section had clearly caught her attention as it was circled not just once, but several times. Safari cook. It's perfect, she said. Make a bit of money and see the country at the same time. I wasn't sure my limited experience of summer jobs would qualify me for such a role. Serving chips in the canteen of the Michelin tire factory in Aberdeen didn't really count as being an actual cook. And as for safari, the closest I got to a safari was the bus journey across the Isle of Mull when you could spot Highland cows or a golden eagle if you were lucky. But somehow I found myself making the call, which resulted in an interview with the boss of a bus company who ran safaris for school pupils travelling from Melbourne into the red centre of Australia. There were 2 of us in for the job, me from Scotland and another candidate from England. I'm sure the other person was much more qualified than me, but they didn't get the job. I did. And the boss told me he'd given me the job because I wasn't a POM. And if you're not familiar with the term, it's an insult directed towards English people by Australians, and the boss didn't like English people. I was a Scot, and that was completely different. Thanks to his casual racism, I was now a safari cook. And a few days later, I was accompanying a group of 30 girls from a private school on a 10-day bus safari to Alice Springs, and the boss himself was one of the 2 drivers. My kitchen was a trailer which trundled along behind the bus, which thankfully included a safari cook folder with details of menus and enough food for the first few days. There were some long hours of serious driving to get to the first camping stop when my safari cooking skills would be put to the test. While the girls put up their tents, I got the evening meal ready. Burgers on the hot plate, salad from the fridge, out onto the fold-out table, baps and butter. I could do this. So far, so good. And after dinner, the girls washed up their dishes and disappeared into their tents. And it was at that point I wondered what the sleeping arrangements were for safari cooks. The boss threw me a sleeping mat. We don't have time for tents, he said. Just find a spot and roll out your bed. But what if it rains? And he pointed to the now empty luggage compartments of the bus. The perils of sleeping out seemed not so bad, given the alternative might be sharing a luggage compartment with big, snowy, casually racist bus drivers. But still, this was Australia, land of creepy crawlies and snakes. So I picked a spot and wriggled into my sleeping bag and pulled the drawstring as tight as I could around my eyes and nose and peeked out at the southern stars all night long. Early the next morning, the boss made sure I was up before the campers to have breakfast ready. The lack of tent made sense. There was no time for such luxuries. And so we journeyed on into the desert. I perched on the wee seat that folds down at the front of the bus and watched the landscape change gradually from green to red. The drivers were old hands, and they helped out when I got a bit frazzled in the kitchen, even the boss, and I got by. But deep down, I knew I wasn't impressing anybody with my safari cook skills. Every night, once everyone was tucked up in their safe and cosy tents, I rolled out my mat and tried to sleep out under the stars. I woke in the mornings with red dust in my nose and hair and a deep fear that this might be the day I'd be found out. And now here I am, an exhausted pretend safari cook, lying in the darkness in the desert, my sleeping bag tightly fastened, with some fearsome creature scraping at the dirt around me. I lie very still. The scratching stops, but I know it's still there, maybe getting ready to pounce. So I decide to open my eyes, and in the dark, I make out the face of some kind of large dog looking at me. Not a friendly, doe-eyed Labrador face like my dog at home, far, far away on the other side of the world, but a scraggy, feral, wild-eyed canine face with big pointy ears, a foxy nose, and a toothy grin. I know enough about Australian wildlife to know that I'm looking into the face of a dingo. I do not know enough about Australian wildlife to know what to do next. Are dingoes really dangerous? Do they eat people? I've heard some stories. Will they attack unprovoked? Do I have any safari cook scraps handy to distract? How much protection is there in a 2-season sleeping bag? Can I even extricate my arms to defend myself? How do I get this knot undone? How quickly could I wriggle away caterpillar style if I had to? What am I doing here? Why am I lying in the desert pretending to be a safari cook anyway? The dingo stares while my mind races, and then the dingo turns and disappears into the darkness. For a moment, joining the drivers in the luggage bin bedroom is quite appealing, but only for a moment, and I decide to stay put. I lie awake again until the dawn, eyes wide open, counting the stars in the southern sky, waiting for the dingo to return, maybe with friends. But morning comes, and we safari on towards the metropolis of Alice Springs. Our last journey with the schoolgirls is to the airport, where they board a plane for Melbourne and their comfy beds, only a few hours away. We drive the bus back, 1,500 miles in a oneer. Once back with my aunt, I pack away the sleeping bag and bring out the fiddle. My career as a safari cook is over. Busking it is.